We are again with another show on aviation. Paul Brennan here in Wellington. G'day, Martin.
G'day, and I'm here in Wellington too.
Where do we start? On the local front, Air New Zealand have come out this week in a presentation to a parliamentary select committee. Of course, remember that we still own 53% of that company, so they do have to front up to Parliament and tell them how they're doing. And they say they're going to be reducing prices, heavy discounts on both local or domestic and international routes. Mr. Luxon, the head of Air New Zealand, made the point in his presentations that they've got a lot of seats on fuel-efficient aircraft that they need to fill, which I found quite an interesting way of putting it, because if you had a fuel-efficient aircraft, normally back in the day with high fuel prices, even if you weren't filling it up, you were doing pretty well because it was as efficient as it could get. You're minimising your fuel cost.
Yeah.
Now, there's a need to, fill every single seat when fuel prices are low. What's going on there?
Well, they've got to test how low they can go because there's a lot of competition just about to enter the market. Air New Zealand has traditionally never been the cheapest. With all the options coming on, with the cheap fuel price, with people possibly running older aircraft into the country, now that the fuel price doesn't form such a huge...
Or not updating to newer ones.
Or not updating, because where the fuel cost used to form the majority of the operational cost of a plane per hour, now it doesn't. It's going to be very, very interesting. I mean, they've offered some staggeringly good fares, like, $800-900 return to the States, $700 and something return to Shanghai. Those are very competitive fares.
They've got very heavy competition to China now, haven't they?
They do, and they're just about to get more with AirAsia X coming on board, Singapore almost definitely coming into Wellington, and that new flight from Doha direct to Auckland.
Yeah, we'll talk about that just in a moment. That's Qatar Airways, but they've got an interesting situation because they've spent heavily on new aircraft. They're not cheap. Even if you're getting launch customer rates, it's still an expensive proposition. Those 777s are nearly 300 million each, I think.
List
price, okay, take 30-40 million off as a discount. You're still talking lots of money. Same with the 787. They've bought a whole lot of Airbus NEOs. They're top dollar.
Yeah.
Yet the driver for buying those,
the whole rationale behind
has
buying
gone
them
because the fuel price is a third now almost of what it was.
It's gone possibly temporarily, although some long-term observers are saying, nah, it'll never come back.
No, I'm with them.
I don't know. If I knew, I'd be out
buying.
But
that's the intuition that you sort of feel.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people are saying. So, interestingly, I think airlines that have gone out and done the right thing, and in the long term it will pay off, but a lot of airlines will be wearing these huge initial costs as they purchase all this new fuel-efficient aircraft, just as it doesn't matter. And you've got people entering the market with, tarted up 767s will be able to make not quite as much money, but a reasonable amount of money.
You imagine the difference for those who have a combination of lease and buy fleets. And it's usually around 50-50, isn't it? They buy half, at least half if it gets really bad, and the leases and use their own. But if you compare, like you just said, a 767-300 ER that can do 90% of the missions of the 787-9, and you can get that off the desert floor now for, if you buy it, it's probably going to be under $6 million.
It's not going to be very much.
The cost of that compared to the lease cost of, say, a 787-9, which must be up over $1 million a month. Boy,
Yeah, and you see airlines like Iceland Air. They've gone out and bought old 767s now to expand into Europe with larger capacity aircraft. There's I think WestJet in Canada.
Yes, they've done the same. They're flying old Qantas ones.
Yeah, transatlantic. It's very interesting, fascinating, and as I said, especially for smaller airlines that have taken on a whole lot of debt, it's going to be quite hard because the only thing they're going to be able to do is where their initial business case had all these projections of a high oil price and increased savings due to these fancy aircraft. Now the only way they're going to go is sell as many seats as they can as cheaply as possible.
To try and cover those costs.
They're not going to make that margin, the margin they're anticipating. They'll still make money, but instead of making a huge margin, they're going to make a relatively smaller margin.
So we're going to be looking to see if, end of next, or when the next reporting round comes, to see how the profit's doing.
Yes.
And
yes.
I got a gut feeling that it may not be as healthy as it's been. For those reasons.
I'd be very surprised if it was. And as we also said a few minutes ago, increased competition is going to drive the prices down. They'll still make money. They should still make money. An efficient aircraft or an efficient tool, or whatever it is.
But you've got to sell this. You've got to have a load factor.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
You've got to get them in it.
If it's a question of people buying on price and not so much on loyalty, you're going to see shifts around.
Wow.
I mean, what are you got to do? Expand the market? You've got to actually get more people flying.
Yeah, that's another issue
That's
as well,
hard.
because the general flying public have become conditioned to just look on price.
Yeah.
The whole loyalty thing that, the airlines try, but at the end of the day, you're sitting on a long tube in a very small seat. Do you care who owns and runs the plane?
Well, here's the thing. Domestically, Jetstar is always singled out for criticism. Sort of a jokey sort of jibes all the time at them for their on-time performance and their attitude. I fly Jetstar all the time, and I've only ever had one delay with them, and they are massively cheaper than Air New Zealand. And I can't understand why people seem to edit that out of their thinking.
Is that the lamestream media and media bias there, Paul?
Well, it could be. But people are prepared to pay insanely more just to say that they're on Air New Zealand, it seems.
Well,
and ignore the cheap stuff. But I reckon in the end, like you say, it's all about price. If you can get to Auckland for $60 and not $280, which is the consistent difference in pricing, and that's massive, then at some point that's going to wear down. And remember, they said they're discounting domestically and internationally. It's across
Yes.
the board.
Now, interesting you say about price as a driver. Yes and no. We see over in Australia that Virgin had to change from being a low-cost airline to being a full-service airline.
Right.
And apparently one of the main drivers behind that is because they weren't able to attract corporates as a low-cost airline. Because interestingly enough, if someone else is paying, you'll take the more expensive
Yeah.
option. You shouldn't, because effectively there's very little difference in the product, but for some reason, the major airlines or the legacy airlines, they're more reliable, they're more this, they offer a better service. But actually, if you're flying for business and it's a difference between $99 and $299, how much service do you want for an hour in the air?
Well, that's right. And perhaps the scale of things in Australia is a bit different from New Zealand. I'm picking that most people who fly in New Zealand are just everyday people, not corporates. There's only so many of those to go around. And of course, Air New Zealand does well out of them because they offer the lounges and all that sort of stuff. But in the end, when money gets tight and cash flow's tight, yeah.
The corporates keep on giving, believe me.
Well, no, but okay, maybe in Australia, but here they are just going to be discounting local airfares. They're doing that for a reason. They're not filling all the seats, or they anticipate that they won't, and I reckon that's price competition.
Airfares will come down, but they'll never match Jetstar.
No, but well, we'll see. We'll see. I'm just making the point that in the end, there's sort of an irrationality that people are prepared to pay more so they can take the piss out of Jetstar. Well, that's your problem. You can feel free to go pay more, but that doesn't make sense anyway. And a lot of the stuff that's said is just sort of slightly made up. Anyway, now you mentioned Qatar, Doha to Auckland, longest direct scheduled air service in the world when it gets going. I think it's about 18 hours they're talking about, and it's a 777 LR, right?
LR, 14,500 kilometres.
Now, who's going to travel from Doha to Auckland, or is that just creating one of these Emirates-style transportation systems so you can go Auckland somewhere else that they can take you? Or do you think there's going to be some, interest in Kiwis wanting to go to Qatar, or Qataris, is that what they're known as, coming to New Zealand?
Yeah, I guess if from Auckland, it's not really that compelling because it's still one stop to Europe.
Yeah, just like everything else.
So it won't be any quicker.
Mind you, their service is a little more.
Oh no!
There, isn't it?
I mean, they're going to be competing on the product, not necessarily on the convenience. Because
gold flushes on the loos.
Yeah, and all that type of thing, and that's good. But yeah, I don't know what it. I'm battling to understand what it actually offers, apart from just extra capacity, extra competition, which is a good thing.
Well, unless Bakar or Baker, depending on how you want to say it,
Alan Baker
has this idea to do the Emirates thing and to create this sort of global transportation system. Though my initial reaction was, he's got some aircraft sitting around doing nothing. Why is that?
Yeah.
Now, where did those LRs used to operate to? Were they off to the States before, were they?
Yeah, and they use them as sort of filler aircraft. So maybe they've decided to identify a few routes which really need the capability of the LR. And also in terms of
Well, he's had a spat too with the Americans, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's pulling out of any of the American cities. That could be why the aircraft's
perhaps. Yeah, or he hasn't been given licenses to fly there.
Yeah.
Qatar do have quite a nice network. For example, if you want to... I've had to go to Austria a few years back, and it was actually quite difficult to get to Austria. The only direct flight I could get to Austria was via Narita, which meant a stopover for a day. It was quite difficult to get to Austria directly without having to. I had to transfer in Europe somewhere.
Right.
But Qatar is quite good for Europe. If you one stop to many cities in Europe. So you get to Doha, you pick up an A320, and you can fly to lots and lots of countries in Europe. So that's quite convenient. Whereas if you fly Lufthansa, they generally put you into Munich or Frankfurt, and then they put you on a smaller plane.
So there could be some convenience factor.
Some slight conveniences, but there again, no more convenient. Well, I suppose yes, more convenient than Emirates, because Emirates doesn't do it non-stop.
Right.
Cut that.
Yeah, well, when you've got that sort of equipment, you can go for 18 hours. It's a very long way. What would that be like in an economy seat?
Yeah, it'd be pretty tight
for that long. Though they have a higher standard of service, don't they? So that might offset that problem. And any other announcements of new air routes? Of course, we commented on the Singapore move into Wellington via Canberra. Now, we thought they would be A330s, but it turns out they'd be 777-200s.
Again, they've got probably these are the planes that are going to be leaving the fleet relatively quickly, and if you want to give something a look-see for 2 or 3 years to see how it works out, chuck an old 777 on it now that the oil price is so low.
Especially also that you might think, we normally sell these aircraft at X amount of time in the fleet, and we expect to get a certain amount for them. We know how low the prices are now for second-hand aircraft. Maybe it actually makes more sense to keep the thing longer in service than then make that sale that you used to get, and
see if you can build a bit of business with it.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's a fire sale of an asset.
Was interesting.
And the fuel price is down. So
Was interesting that the comment that I read in the papers and this was kind of overwhelmingly negative about it.
Yeah, well, that's New Zealand for you.
And I thought, geez, you should be happy.
You can look at it two ways, Martin. It can be a development, or it can be, oh no, not something else.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I suppose so. I think it's also tied up in, because another thing, getting back to talking about Air New Zealand, as part of that presentation to the parliamentary committee, Luxon said that the business case for extending the runway at Wellington was not there. It was a dumb thing to do. Now, he would say that, because already he's got competition without the thing even being extended.
Yeah.
Of course there's business to be made. What he's actually saying is we don't want to be facing that competition.
Absolutely.
It's naked.
It's always a bit suspect when you use the chief of the main competitor to any development as a commentator on that development, because of course they're not going to be interested in it.
Yeah, it was reported that way anyway. Of course, a lot of people could pile into that route. Emirates could go via Adelaide. We've talked about that before.
Yep.
Then you've got a 777-300 coming in there. That's huge capacity, and you're only flying A320s. You're done.
Yeah, no, it's going to be, especially when that Peter Jackson Museum opens up on the waterfront, there'll be people coming from all over the world, or wanting to come from all over the world.
So watch that space, but people have always got reasons for saying the things they do. The negative reaction to something positive is a particularly Kiwi thing, I would suggest. It's always no before yes, Martin.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and some of the complaints in that were quite detailed, and you see, no one was, or very few people were looking at the opportunity this affords. Also,
airports are sort of in the category of build it and they will come. I mean, if you don't build it, no one's going to sit there saying, please, lengthen the runway, we want to come. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's got to be there already. You go, oh, hey, this is an option. Maybe we should do this.
Wait for the noise complaints as well.
Well, everything's quiet now, so I don't see...
It won't be that much noise but visually it'll attract people, and they say, oh, gosh, that's noisy.
Imagine what it was like when those 737-200s without hush kits were blasting off in the early 70s.
Brilliant.
Popping the air.
Crackle, yeah.
Has there been an official announcement from Qatar? There's a lot of speculation. Has the man actually come out and said it?
It's reportedly going to operate.
Okay. All right. Well, where there's smoke, there's fire. And speaking of the A320 NEO series, Lufthansa got their first one, so that's in delivery now. So that means what? Problems are overcome?
No, they're going to live with the problems for a few weeks/months until the software fix and a part is swapped out. But they say, I was reading on the German press the other night, that it's not a big deal, it's just something to be operationally aware of and manage accordingly.
Well, why then does Lufthansa become the launch customer? I think Qatar were originally. Are they better able to deal with the procedures that are required initially to operate that, handle that engine, and still have it work in service? Is that
obviously there's a huge Airbus presence in Germany. Pratt & Whitney probably have just as many people in Europe at the moment, so they can support it. The fix is apparently a combination of a software fix for the shutdown and spooling up when warm,
Yeah.
and a heat-treated part,
All right.
which they think will stop the warping. And the warping, it's not unusual for a jet engine to have this problem. They didn't think it was going to be as big a problem as it turned out to be. But it can't be that big because, one small part's apparently going to be heat treated and some software is going to fix it. And they've tested the fix; they know it's going to fix it.
And the thing's in service as of today.
The things, and I'm pretty sure Lufthansa were happy to be the launch customer because it gives them a few extra months to, test it and see how well it works.
They are Airbus's biggest customer, Lufthansa. I see. So there's a lot there. The interesting thing is that, and it's Pratt & Whitney, it's sort of a bit of Back to the Future thing, because one remembers the early days of the 747 where they had a fundamental problem with the JT9 engine, and that was casings warping and the fans rubbing and letting go. I think there was a lot of frustration from the Boeing people that Pratt & Whitney sort of weren't taking it so seriously and it was taking too long to fix. And there are those photos of all those brand new 74s lined up on the ramp at Everett with concrete blocks hanging off the engine pylons because they're waiting for production engines, and it sort of delayed things a while. And here they are all this time later, and they sort of got
same thing's happening. There's a
slightly similar problems. Yeah.
Large collection of A320 NEOs backing up in Toulouse.
Yeah, because they've got to keep making them.
They haven't stopped making them, and apparently there's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, I wonder if there'll be any compensation issues for delayed deliveries that might have to deal with.
I'm sure that's what Qatar's talking about.
Will the engine manufacturer be liable for that, wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you're probably hearing the same conversations between Airbus and Pratt & Whitney as you heard back in the 60s, late 60s.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember seeing a doco, and I think that one of the strategies that Boeing used was to take the head of Pratt & Whitney up for test flight in the 747 prototype and max out the engines or one of the engines on purpose so it would surge and give way, and they'd shut it down and make the point. And I think he did get the point where he saw that, and things moved on pretty quickly after that. So it's
obviously the way
story.
It's obviously the way Pratt operate.
Yeah, maybe they have a culture of it.
Yeah.
I remember reading a piece about their history, and it was one of either Mr. Pratt or Mr. Whitney was an eccentric, and he used to walk around the workshops. And he was an engineer himself, and if he would sort of randomly drop in on work being done, and if it wasn't up to his standard, he'd sort of humiliate the person involved in front of everybody, and then cast the object upon the ground with great force, and then move on. You know,
on some management training course I did for one of the companies I work for, they said, you've got to find errors and jump on them quickly, because if you commit the same error more than once, it becomes culture.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah,
very difficult to
and
get out.
You need to shatter it.
Yeah, you need to remove it real quick.
Ingrained. So, now speaking of Boeing. Interesting situation developing here on two fronts. The 747-8, we've been talking about or making comments about that possibly being the last we see of the Queen of the Skies. Now it looks like it, doesn't it? Cutting production from 1.5 units to 0.5 per month. That's so slow.
Yeah, that's just basically keeping the line open, isn't it?
Pace, yeah. So obviously they are thinking of those Air Force orders, for Air Force One?
Yeah.
Or what would be Air Force One? So there's 2 aircraft involved in that order.
I think this time they're talking of 4.
And there's the E-4Bs, the Doomsday planes.
Yeah.
I think they had 6 of them. Would they want to replace them one for one? Probably.
Yeah.
There could still be one of those wars,
Could be.
To have, your command station hardened against electromagnetic pulse in the sky somewhere.
Although once Trump gets in and goes and really sorts out the evildoers, there'll be peace on earth forevermore, won't there?
Well, you won't need that.
No.
Apparently, you can't use white tails for those E4
Bs
because they need to have special treatment in areas of the fuselage for that pulse thing.
Oh, okay.
And that's
the
like
EM electromagnetic
sandwiched
pulse.
in, I think. So it's a special build.
Oh, okay.
In
that's why they've hung on to the old ones for so long.
Could be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's features of them.
Faraday cage.
Yeah.
Line it with copper or something.
Is that what they call it? Yeah, but it's apparently not as simple as just taking a few white tails, maybe for transport, but not for command, as I understand it.
So yeah, that really is looking like the end of the line for the 747. I hope I get to go in a 747-8 Intercontinental.
Oh, you will. They'll be in service for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
How many orders they got left? It's about, what, a dozen or something?
I think it's 22,
Okay,
but
well,
there are some whitetails which are still being refurbished, and so I don't know whether that number's included.
Are they freighters?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So they're not talking passenger planes.
No.
Here. So that will trickle to an end. I see they've got 3,000 workers directly employed to assemble the 747 at the assembly plant. They're going to have to lay some people off, surely.
Or put them onto other programs.
Yeah, but other programs aren't expanding. Look at the 777. They're talking about a 50% reduction in production, down to 50 a year, to keep that thing going until their X model starts, which is still years away.
This is kind of a nightmare.
It's like 4 years away.
This is kind of a nightmare scenario for Boeing. It's this production gap between the phasing out of the old and the phasing in of the new. They've been constantly denying that it's a problem, so they've got to get 200 more orders between now and I think the end of 2019.
How can they do that?
It's just not going to happen.
No.
And you know, their whole strategy was actually flawless when they came up with a 787 and get it into service on time, and now they'd have been throwing hundreds and hundreds of those out of the door every year. That didn't happen. They put everything into the 777, kind of rightly, because it's a fantastic aircraft and done really well. But everything's just happening a little bit too late for them.
Well, it seems to me that they had to come out and say they're doing this 777X quite early because Airbus were continually making the play.
They were forced.
But then they also made that announcement with no work done on it, right? So they're having to announce the program before any part of the program started. And of course, you're going to have this huge lag time. It's actually, it's like, spoiler alert, we're going to make something, but it's 4 years. And then the competition says, oh, okay, well, we'll know exactly what they're going to be doing.
Yeah.
All we need to do is tweak our product. In the meantime, we've got 4 years.
Yeah.
Anything could happen. And by the time they roll the thing out, it might not even be competitive. You know?
2020, Airbus will announce a performance improvement package for the A350s available in 18 months. So coming up for 2022, which will suck another 5% out of the cost of that thing.
Again, it's what phase you are in the product. And I guess Boeing have been caught out of phase. And they're having to sort of hype it. And they're not going to sell that many planes. It's just, there's no way.
No,
They almost have to give them away to.
And imagine if this oil price fall had happened. You know, what if? But if the oil price had fallen 3 or 4 years ago, maybe they'd have sold quite a lot more 747s.
Maybe. Who knows? The problem is, though, people are like Iceland Air more interested in pulling out, 30-year-old ex-Qantas 76s off the desert and put them in there until further notice.
That's exactly what's affecting the production gap. Yeah. It's why would
it's the worst of all worlds.
Well, you can go and pick up a 777 for 10 mil, can't you?
Yeah.
Malaysian Airlines is retiring all of their 777s.
Yeah. Well, they're pretty old, I've got to say.
Yeah.
But they'll find homes, won't they?
Yeah.
Of course they will, yeah.
Might be the desert, but they'll find one.
Well, no, for the price there, someone said, relating to the Malaysian ones, I saw someone said, well, Delta will probably...
Yeah, I saw that,
They've got roller engines, and they're pretty close to what they do anyway, so...
And they'll have been well looked after.
Yeah, because basically they're a good airline. Oh, by the way, the Prime Minister, that was a gift from the Saudi royal family, $681 million, for helping to fight an election.
Yeah.
But he gave it back. He gave it back. He gave most of it back.
Well, they lent me $200 million the other day, and I haven't given it back yet.
Yeah. What, just for being a nice guy?
Yeah, just for this and that, as one does.
All right, okay, so the Malaysians retiring their 777s, and I see there was a bit of wreckage found off the coast of Japan, back to MAS 370 in this case, and it looked like the fin of something, and people got excited and said, here's another bit, but then someone said, no, that looks like a bit off a Japanese rocket, which fell into the sea, so... Just shows you, stuff floating around everywhere. You wouldn't believe.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, big chunks of Japanese rocket.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah.
It's like, we found our rocket. Yeah. God for that. We wonder where that got to. All right. Now, last time we talked about doing a aircraft of the day, month, week, whatever we do. We thought that we might do that new Chinese stealth fighter, which actually, it looks very modern. I've seen pictures of it. And they seem to be onto something there. Are they? What's it called?
The Chengdu J-20.
Oh. Okay, so it is stealth. It looks sort of like an elongated F-22 is what I saw.
Yeah. It's a sort of elongated F-22. I don't know if anybody remembers the YF-23, the Northrop concept that competed against the F-22 Raptor.
Vaguely.
Yeah, vaguely. It had very widely canted vertical stabilizers.
Right.
So this thing looks like an F-22 with outwardly canted vertical stabilizers, and it's got a sort of canard arrangement on the front.
Okay.
And the Chinese are referring to it as a fourth-generation fighter. The West are referring to it as a fifth-generation fighter.
Okay, I can't keep up. What does all that mean?
Well,
what's the third one? So I can get at least a stake in the ground.
I think the F-16 would have been the third generation.
I hear you. So I didn't know where we're at.
Yeah,
so are they one
F-15,
ahead of the
F-16.
F-22
Well...
on generations?
Well, the Chinese are saying not, but the West is saying yes, this is a fifth-generation fighter, which is very, very interesting. This seems to be the first Chinese weapons platform that people are taking very, very seriously. It's big, so they've got, Russian philosophy of making them big.
Right.
Very capable. At the moment, it's still using Russian engines while the Chinese continue development of their engine, which is going into it. That's the big breakthrough, apparently. This new engine the Chinese are going to put into it, which they've developed themselves, will enable super cruise, extreme long range, stealthy. By all accounts, it's highly agile, and it looks to be all around a very good aircraft.
I wonder what the Americans are going to make of this thing.
Yes, well, obviously the Americans will talk it up because they want a new long range bomber.
Okay, so this could actually help the US industrial military complex.
Absolutely, it's a ratchet, isn't it? So
they've got to match that or go X amount better.
And so the Americans will release their new long-range bomber, which will be a fifth-generation bomber. The Chinese will call it a 12th-generation bomber and demand funding to design a 15th-generation fighter to counter the bomber. Yeah, it's all the big game.
We'll all be confused. So is it still being tested, or is it actually going into...
It's actually going into limited squadron service at the moment, but these are sort of test squadrons.
Yeah.
But the actual initial flight testing and all that is over and done with, and they are slowly leaking them out, however, still with the Russian engines.
And it's made out of special material, radar-absorbing material and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's the real deal.
All the components, do we know? You mentioned the engines. We know they're Russian, but they will become Chinese. But all the other components, the avionics and all that, they're
apparently
all
as far as possible, they've gone down the Chinese path. So the processing units and everything are Chinese. They've used this as a very big,
it's like
driver for local industry
improvement.
Yeah,
but they make a lot of high-tech stuff anyway, don't they? So there's nothing new to them. They're making electronic componentry for everything you can ever imagine.
Absolutely. So
it's
not difficult for them to make. Traditionally, what's been difficult for them is the integration, and I think that always is the most difficult thing. So you can build the individual sensors, that's good, you can build the individual components, but it's getting that whole thing in and working all together
harmoniously,
which has been very, very hard.
Well, there's a name for that. It's the indoor-outdoor flow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Japanese. Has to have the right indoor-outdoor flow before it works properly.
That's exactly what they're looking for.
Okay, so flow. What's the name of it again?
It's the Chengdu J-20.
The Chengdu J-20. Anyway, that's our program again for another fortnight. We'll be back in a few weeks with more. Until then, Paul Brennan in Welly and
Martin Noakes in Wellington.
See you around.
Cheers.